Listen and welcome to A Link to the Filmcast. I'm your host, David Reese, in the show where we adventure across the realms of Hyrule and the Silver Screen. This is my first bonus episode I'm doing for the feed. I don't want to turn this into a video game review channel, which isn't what we've done so far, but I play multiple games at a time. I was concurrently playing God of War and Echoes of Wisdom at the same time, and I finally rolled credits on God of War. And I wanted to create that as content, or not as content. I wanted to talk about it. It's not necessarily Zelda, but there's things that put it in the same space as Zelda. It's an adventure, there's combat, bosses, puzzles, and it's action, it's fantasy, and I think they occupy the same space and maybe just slightly different audiences. I want to talk about it and my impressions of the game. I don't want it to be like my mainline episode, so I'm just going to have bonus episodes. Whenever I finish a game, I'll talk about it. Except for Echoes of Wisdom. When I finish that one, I'll probably do a full review episode on that. But I wanted to talk about God of War. This is 2018's God of War. This is the one that came out on the PS4. The reimagining of the franchise. I never played the original trilogy or the original God of War games for like the PS1, PS2. I knew of them. I knew the main character Kratos, and I knew he was just a violent, powerful guy that went around killing and doing what he wanted, but I wasn't really in tune to the lore. I knew it had to do with Greece and Sparta. And then playing this game, knowing nothing really about it, there were a few things I was a little confused on or didn't get. But as a standalone game, it's pretty, you don't really need to know his backstory. He's a new start. He has a new start. He's up in Scandinavia. He's left his homeland of Greece. And he started a new life. He had a wife and he has a kid. So yeah, let's just jump in. I don't know how much more backstory I need about this game. Got a PS5 last year for Christmas, and that came with Ragnarok. And I started playing Ragnarok, and I felt kind of lost because I didn't play the previous game. So my brother-in-law generously gifted me the first game. That way I could play Ragnarok and know what's going on. And so, okay, God of War 2018. Overall impressions, loved it. It's a well-polished game. A few gripes with it, but I don't know what the roots of the franchise is. It's a well-polished game. The level design has this nice level of if you go the extra step, you'll find a little treasure. You don't have, if you just follow the mainline track, you still get some treasure, but not as much. I'm working on post-game content right now, which is kind of new for me. Most of the games I play, like Zelda, there's not really a post game. There's just your save file before you do the final thing, and that's it. Where the post game for this is essentially any side quest you didn't complete, get the best gear in the game, and then save the corrupted Valkyries is kind of the post game. Unless you do all that stuff before you finish the main game. But the main game is nice. It has some quality of life things. I like how Mimir and Atreus both kind of mention, like, hey, do you want to adventure more, or should we go on to the next objective? They're kind of giving you nice breaks in the story, like, now would be a good time for side quests, or now's a good time or we should just move on with the game. I kind of like that. I wish more games. It's always a difficult balance of when's a good time to do side quests versus when am I near the end of a main story thread. When does it naturally take place? I don't know. As Xenoblade Chronicles 3, I had that issue where between main story threads, I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. So I spent like 10 hours exploring and doing side quests. And by the next time I came up to the main story, I was way over leveled. I was like, great. So then I was over leveled for the rest of the game, which is fine. I was doing the side content, and I guess that was to be expected. But let's talk about the story in this game. I like how the story, we open up to funeral pyre. Kratos and Atreus' mom, or Kratos' wife, Faye. And the main quest of the story is her dying wish was to have her ashes spread from the highest point in all the realms. Nice, easy, not sure, easy, nice, simple plot point or plot goal. That's what they're trying to do. And then the game is basically them trying to get to the highest points and things happening to them, which is great storytelling. I don't like the, okay, so we have to do this and this, like a checklist story structure. I'd prefer the, okay, we're almost there. Oh no, something happens. They're climbing up they get to the top of the mountain, which is the highest point in Midgard, the realm they happen to live in. But then it turns out it's not the highest point in all the realms. So then they have to travel from realm to realm trying to collect things so they can get to Jotunheim, this mysterious realm of the giants that happens to not be as easy to get to as one may think. And all the meanwhile, they meet characters along the way. They got Freya, Balder, Mimir, Sindri, and Brock, and then we have characters that we don't even see in this game. And all the characters are great. The side quests I kind of touched on. You really do the side quests throughout the game to unlock new armor or upgrades. And that was one of my things. The combat in, let's see. Let's talk about the weapons and the armor. You got two weapons. You got your Leviathan axe and Atreus' bow to upgrade. And I suppose I should put a spoiler warning on this game. This is going to be a spoiler episode. If you don't want to be spoiled on this at right now 6-year-old game, I'd stop listening. I probably should have put that up on top. But no, I'm going to jump into it. This is a spoiler cast. We're going to talk about the whole game. Voice crack, gross. We're going to talk about the whole game, and we're going to talk about plot points, characters, stuff that happens. I don't want to limit myself to what I can and can't talk about. This has been out long enough, and it's just a bonus app. So this game was a treat. I don't even like it. It looks beautiful. It's a fun game. The combat. Okay, combat. This is my first time playing a game with this kind of combat. I guess it's more action focused. You got your light attacks, heavy attacks, and then some sort of combos, and then you can get different runes, light runes, heavy runes to do special light attacks and special heavy attacks. You also get later on in the game the chains, the blades of chaos. So then you introduce an elemental component to the game. You have an ice weapon and a fire weapon to fight against ice enemies and fire enemies. So there's an elemental thing. Doesn't play as big of a role as you might think. They kind of want players to play with the weapon of their choice, except for a few instances. Especially towards the end, they'll try to element lock certain enemies. What else to say on that? Learning the enemies, learning their attack patterns, and learning how to strike was fun. But then, unfortunately, there's a lack of enemy type. So you really have your fodder enemies, the Drower. Then you have big Drower that have a little more health and different kind of attacks, which both types of Drower, the fodder enemies, you can defeat just by wailing on them. You have your giants, your troll things, and the trolls, you just wail on them, get them to a stun point, and then you can wail on them more. You have your ancients. Ancients, you have to use their own element against them, and once you get in the pattern of it, they're pretty, you just do the pattern, go through the moves, and defeat them. And I'm trying to think, and there's not too much. I played on normal difficulty. I'm sure if I cranked up the difficulty to hard or give me God of War, it would be a different story, a different view of perspective. But for playing on normal difficulty, that's how it felt to me. Just a lot of wailing and button mashing. Maybe when I play Ragnarok, I'll play it on hard difficulty to try to immerse myself in it more and give me more of a challenge as I'm running through it. I didn't want to do story mode. I started in story mode, but things just went by too fast and I didn't feel like I was enjoying it. So maybe if I do it on hard, I'll spend more time in areas and get more of an appreciation for like the combat. Characters. Let's talk about the characters. The character. So I mentioned earlier, it's a pretty simple plot line, but things happen and characters are there. And the characters are great. We got Kratos, the main character, our God of War. He's got development through the story. He starts off, he's this stoic guy from Greece, and he's very private, and he's very just focused on the task at hand, and he just thinks of himself and Atreus, and he's very skeptical about the world. He's not very trusting, and I'm assuming that's due to stuff in his past. He's very skeptical, and he's really straight to the point. He doesn't want to deal with fluff and things in the way. It's either kill or be killed. Look with God of War, with Kratos, the God of War, which makes sense. And then we have Boy, or Atreus. His name's Atreus, but throughout the game, all the dialogue, he's referred to as Boy, because that's how his father sees him. Through the game, Kratos learns that the boy Atreus is growing up, and he can handle himself from this adventure, prove his worth to his father, and there's setbacks. There's times where he gets an ego and some of his training is forgotten. But that's bound to happen to any kid, really. We're humans. We have flaws. We have Freya, the ex-wife of Odin, as we found out later in the game. She's the Witch of the Woods, kind of the loving maternal figure in this game since Atreus' mom is dead. She's magic. We have Balder, Freya's son, who is a god that is immune to damage, can't feel a thing, which is kind of hard to beat. But like Kratos says, even in Greece mythology, everyone's got a weakness. Just a bulk of the game was figuring out what was his weakness, and we only find it out by chance, which is interesting. There's the final fight, and he pushes Atreus and happens to cut himself on the mistletoe, which is so, what are the odds of that happening and happening to be his weakness? Balder ends up being like the big bad for this game. He's trying to hunt down a foreigner, Kratos, in the land under the belief that he could start the end of the world. I'm not too clear on that. Why Balder? I feel like Balder was sent because he was a foreigner and he posed a threat to the power structure they had going. And he probably is. I'm excited to play Ragnarok and see how things turn out. We have Mimir, which is Odin's ex-advisor. He's the smartest man alive, prisoned inside of a tree. We chop off his head and bring him back to life, so now we have a talking head on our waist. Great exposition dump character, really. Because in our party, Kratos and Atreus, Kratos doesn't know anything of the gods of these lands. Atreus only knows stuff he heard from his mom. So getting to hear another perspective from Mimir was great. As you're rowing the boat, he'd tell stories. as you reach certain plot points where we need an explanation, Mimir would explain it. He was a great addition to this cast. And then we got Sindri and Brock, the dwarves upgrade brothers. They just appear random points throughout the game to upgrade your gear with the material you collect. They kind of have a bitter brother thing, and they think the other brothers' handiwork isn't as good as theirs. Sindri is kind of a germaphobe, clean freak, while Brock is kind of whatever. And then we have unseen characters in this game. There's a lot of talk about Odin and Thor, and then Faye that I hope we get more. I know some things about Ragnarok, and I think we see all these characters in it, so I'm excited to see how that turns out. This was between the characters, the gameplay, the puzzles. We didn't talk about the puzzles yet. The puzzles are fun. You only have a few puzzle solving tools at your disposal. And a lot of the puzzles I felt like were, if you can connect the dots, the puzzle is solved. They didn't really have too many random out of the way things. So everything in the room was used. It's just a matter of how do you use it. And then there was sometimes if you're kind of stuck, Atreus talked a little like, hey, I think there's something with that. Kind of a nudge in the right direction. It was interesting. The puzzles, there's some challenges, I have to admit. There was some challenging ones that didn't make sense right off the bat, and they didn't repeat the prompts like I thought they would. So I did have to look up one or two, unfortunately, and be like, well, how would I know this? Because there's no traditional text options where you can just chat and have them repeat the context clues. Namely, there was one with 4 seasons, but they had to be reverse. That one I didn't get right away. And then once I got that solution, I felt dumb. But I don't know if I can harp on the game for that one or just my own idiocracy. But great game. If you have access to or the means to play this God of War, or if you want to talk about it, I want to hear your guys' thoughts. I'm debating about doing like a play along or a let's play. Would we want to do games like this while we alternate with Zelda games? And for the Zelda games, what order do we play them in? Release order, chronological timeline order, just random order? I don't know. I think that's just going to be it for this short little bonus episode. Give us a follow at Zeldafilmcast on X. And as always, may the Triforce be with you.